My suitcases were ready by the door since the night before, but my son-in-law's mocking laugh chilled my blood more than the winter wind. I'm Adelaide. I'm 68 years old, and I was a head nurse for 3 decades. I know how to distinguish a real emergency from a false alarm, but I never saw the blow coming that my own family had prepared for me. They think I'm a useless old woman who only serves to take up space, but they forgot that this house, their luxury refuge, carries my name on the deed. I was always a woman of order. In the hospital, chaos meant losing lives, and in my house, order meant peace of mind. However, since my daughter Lucy and her husband Robert moved in with me temporarily 5 years ago, my peace had vanished. The house is large, a solid 1970s build in a neighborhood that eventually became exclusive, full of old trees and cobblestone streets. My husband Ernest and I built it with the sweat of our brows, thinking of leaving a legacy. I never imagined that legacy would become my own prison. That morning, the dining room looked like a battlefield. There were breakfast leftovers everywhere, eggshells, coffee stains on the embroidered tablecloth I had ironed the day before, and crumbs of toast on the floor. My grandkids, 2 spoiled little tornadoes, whom I adore but who don't know the meaning of the word boundaries, were running around screaming with mouse ears on their heads. "We're going to Disney! We're going to see Mickey!" they yelled while jumping on the velvet sofas. I walked down the stairs slowly, minding my knees, dragging my small brown leather suitcase. It's an old but sturdy bag, the same one I used to take to medical conferences in the capital. I was excited. I hadn't been on vacation in years. Lucy had asked for my credit card months ago to book the flights and take advantage of a deal. And I, naive as a novice, gave it to her, thinking it was a family gift that they were finally including me in their plans. I reached the living room and saw Robert trying to zip up a gigantic suitcase, one of those modern ones with wheels that spin in every direction. Lucy was flipping through a stack of documents with that air of self-importance she adopted the day she married him. "Good morning," I said, trying to make myself heard over the kids' racket. "I'm ready. What time is the shuttle getting here?" A sudden silence fell, as if someone had cut the audio cable on a movie projector. Robert looked up, sweaty and red in the face from the effort of closing the luggage. He looked at me, then looked at my small brown suitcase, and let out a laugh. It wasn't a joyful laugh. It was a dry, raspy sound loaded with mockery. "You?" he asked, as if I had just told an absurd joke. "Mother-in-law, please, where do you think you're going with that old piece of junk?" I felt a knot in the pit of my stomach, that cold sensation that warns you something is very wrong. I looked at my daughter, searching for support, searching for a logical explanation. "Lucy, honey, the tickets you bought with my card." Lucy didn't even look up from the passports. She just kept counting the dollar bills in her hand. "Oh, Mom, don't start getting confused on us now we're in a hurry," she said, using the exact tone of voice she used to scold the children. "We used your card because Robert's was maxed out. Obviously, we're going to pay you back eventually, but the trip is for us. It's a family trip." "Family," I repeated, feeling my legs tremble. "And what am I? A neighbor?" Robert straightened up and wiped his hands on his pants. He walked toward me with the arrogance of a man who feels he owns the world without ever having worked for it. "You are the grandmother Adelaide, and grandmothers stay home. Someone has to watch this place." He did a broad, sweeping gesture that encompassed my living room, my furniture, my life. "We can't leave the house empty for 15 days. You need to water the garden, get the mail, and make sure we don't get robbed. Besides, let's be realistic. You can't keep up with the pace at the parks. You'd slow us all down. You'd be a burden." A burden. The word echoed in my ears. I, who had physically lifted patients twice my weight. I, who had carried the financial weight of this house since Ernest died. I, who washed their clothes, cooked their meals, and watched their kids whenever they wanted to go out partying. "But I thought," I stammered, feeling the humiliation crawl up my neck, hot and stinging. "You thought wrong, mother-in-law," Robert interrupted, grabbing my leather suitcase and kicking it out of the way into a corner like it was garbage. "Just help us load the bags into the cab, he's honking outside. And please don't forget the dog needs his special food twice a day. I don't want Duke getting skinny while we're gone." I stood paralyzed. My hands, usually steady and skilled enough to find the most difficult veins, were shaking at my sides. It wasn't sadness I was feeling. At first, I thought it was the urge to cry, but no, it was something deeper. It was the sudden, brutal comprehension of my reality. For years, I had told myself they were here to keep me company, that they loved me, that we were a team. But in that exact instant, looking at my daughter's back as she walked out without even giving me a goodbye kiss, the blindfold fell from my eyes. I wasn't a member of the family. I was the janitor. I was the unpaid domestic help. I was a convenient accessory that came included with the free house. I walked out to the porch dragging my feet. The morning sun was bright, insultingly cheerful. The cab driver was helping Robert with the bags. The kids were already inside, fighting over the window seat. "Bye, Grandma," the oldest yelled, without much interest, never looking up from his tablet. Lucy walked up to the passenger window before getting in. "Mom, I left a list of things on the fridge. The gardener comes on Tuesday. You have to pay him in cash because we didn't have time to hit the ATM. I'll pay you back later. And don't touch the AC in our bedroom. It messes up the settings." "Have fun," I managed to say, my voice cracking. "Oh, and mother-in-law," Robert yelled from the back seat. "If the mail comes, put everything in my office. Don't be nosy. Don't open anything. See you in 15 days. Behave." The taxi pulled away, leaving a cloud of gray exhaust that slowly dissipated in the clean neighborhood air. I stood there in the driveway of my own home, watching my dignity get hauled away in that yellow vehicle. I went back inside. The silence of the house was overwhelming. I walked through the living room, dodging scattered toys. I went to the kitchen. Dirty dishes were piled high in the sink. A spilled cup of coffee was slowly dripping onto the floor. "Clean this up, Adelaide," a voice whispered in my head, the voice of habit, the voice of submission. But then something shifted. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I saw an older woman, yes, with gray hair pulled back into a strict bun and wrinkles mapping out a hard life. But I also saw the eyes of the woman who had run an emergency room during the '89 earthquake. I saw the firm jaw of the woman who didn't back down when hospital administrators wanted to slash the medicine budget. "Watch the house," I said out loud. My voice sounded strange in the empty living room. "Yeah, Robert, I'm going to watch the house. I'm going to make sure this house meets the exact fate it deserves." I walked toward the office. It was Ernest's office, my husband's, a sacred place that used to smell of pipe tobacco and old wood. Since they moved in, Robert had claimed it as his own. He had taken down Ernest's degrees to hang up movie posters and his amateur softball trophies. I stepped inside and smelled the stale odor of a room kept shut. Robert had told me not to be nosy, not to open anything. I walked up to the desk. It was locked. But Robert, in his infinite arrogance, severely underestimated my powers of observation. I knew perfectly well that he hid the key under a hideous plastic planter he kept on the windowsill. I lifted the pot, grabbed the small silver key, and unlocked the center drawer. I didn't care about his dirty secrets or his magazines. I was looking for something specific, something that belonged to me. I shoved aside a stack of unpaid bills that they were undoubtedly hoping I would pay by mistake, and I found what I was looking for, at the very bottom, tucked inside a green leather folder I had placed there myself years ago. I pulled out the original property deeds and laid them on the desk. The paper was thick, yellowed by time, but the black ink was clear and irrevocable. Sole owner, Adelaide Morales. There were no co-owners. There were no clauses protecting ungrateful children or parasitic sons-in-law. The house was mine, 100% mine. I sat down in the squeaky leather swivel chair, the one that used to belong to my husband, and it groaned under the weight of my decision. I looked at the calendar on the wall. I had exactly 15 days, 2 full weeks. No screaming, no orders, no disrespect. I remembered an afternoon about 6 months ago, when a very polite young man knocked on the door. He was a real estate agent. He told me a group of investors was looking for large properties in the area to redevelop, or for foreign clients paying cash. Robert had screamed at him, chased him off the porch, and yelled, "This house is not for sale, get lost." But Robert wasn't the owner. I went to the drawer in the living room end table where I keep my sewing threads. There, wedged between a spool of black thread and a pack of needles, was the business card the young man had managed to hand me before my son-in-law slammed the door in his face. Harvey Bennett, premium real estate, fast cash purchases, absolute discretion. I held the card between my fingers. The cardstock felt cold and sharp. My heart, which minutes ago had been broken and humiliated, began to beat to a different rhythm. A rhythm like war drums. I walked into the kitchen, shoved the dirty plates aside with a look of disgust, and poured myself a glass of water. I drank it slowly, savoring the silence. Then I picked up the landline phone, that old cream-colored device hanging on the wall that they considered a useless relic. I dialed the number on the card. One by one, the digits chimed with a musical tone. "Hello?" answered a professional masculine voice on the third ring. I cleared my throat. I was no longer the grandmother left behind. I was Boss Adelaide. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett. This is Adelaide Morales. You were at my house a few months ago?" I paused, looking around, observing the walls that had absorbed so much humiliation. "I am interested in selling, but it has to be fast. I have a 15-day window of opportunity, and I need the house empty and the deal closed before that window shuts." On the other end of the line, I felt the agent hold his breath before replying with contained enthusiasm. "Absolutely, Mrs. Morales. Could I come see you today?" I smiled. A real smile, one that hadn't reached my face in years. "Come in an hour and bring the paperwork. We are not going to waste time." I hung up the phone. I looked at the brown leather suitcase Robert had kicked. I picked it up, carefully wiped it off with the sleeve of my sweater, and placed it on the dining table in a place of honor. They had gone chasing plastic fantasies and costumes. I was staying right here in reality, about to execute the most delicate and satisfying operation of my entire life. "Watch the house," they had told me. And oh, I was going to watch it. I was going to make sure it was never a free hotel for ungrateful freeloaders ever again. The game was on. I hung up the phone and the silence of the house settled over me. But this time it didn't weigh like a concrete slab. It felt clean, like a freshly sterilized operating room right before major surgery. I stood there for a moment, looking at the receiver, listening to the hum of the open line, before placing it back on its cradle. My heart, that old engine that sometimes skipped a beat, was pumping with a strength and regularity I hadn't felt since my days pulling double shifts in the ER. I walked down the central hallway. My footsteps echoed against the hardwood floors Ernest and I had picked out 40 years ago. I ran my hand along the wall, feeling the crayon marks my grandkids had left behind. Lucy, in her eternal laziness, never cleaned them, claiming they were artistic expression. To me, they had always been scars of disrespect. I walked into the kitchen. The disaster was still there. The spilled coffee, the crumbs, the grime. Normally, my conditioned reflex would have been to grab a rag and the dish soap, pull on my yellow gloves, and scrub until my fingers pruned. But my hands stayed perfectly still at my sides. "No," I said out loud. I wasn't going to clean. Not for them. If I was going to lift a single finger, it would be to prepare the ground for my liberation. I headed to my bedroom, the only room I kept locked when I left the house, even though I knew Robert had a spare key, just in case of an emergency. The emergency had arrived, just not the one he was expecting. I sat down at my old mahogany vanity and opened the bottom drawer where I kept the heavy winter sheets. I reached all the way to the back, feeling past the soft fabric and the scent of dried lavender, until my fingers brushed the cold metal of a small portable lockbox. I pulled it out and set it on the bed. It wasn't big, barely the size of a shoebox, but it was heavy. Heavy because of what it contained, not what it was made of. I dialed the combination. Ernest's birthday. The click of the mechanism was music to my ears. I lifted the lid. There were no crown jewels or gold bars inside, but there was something far more valuable in this exact moment: information and liquidity. First, I pulled out a black notebook, my logbook, as I jokingly called it. For 5 years, every time Robert asked to borrow money for gas, every time Lucy used my card for groceries and forgot to pay me back, every time I covered the kids' private school tuition because they were a little short this month, I wrote it down. Date, item, and amount. In my small, angular nurse's handwriting, I had recorded every single cent they had drained from me. I flipped the book open at random. March 12th, Robert's car repair, $8,500. Promise to pay by end of month. Status, unpaid. April 4th, party dress for Lucy, $4,200. Status, unpaid. I turned the pages. The grand total at the bottom of the very last page was chilling. With that money, I could have traveled around the world twice. They said I was a burden, that I lived off their care. The notebook told the truth. They were the parasites, and I was the host they were slowly killing. Beneath the notebook was my real insurance policy, a savings passbook from an old bank account that had changed names twice over the years, but was still perfectly active. Ernest had made me promise I would never touch that money unless it was a matter of life or death. "It's your escape fund, Adelaide," he used to say. "You never know what turns life will take." How right you were, old man. I checked the balance. Compound interest over 20 years had done its silent work. I had enough liquid cash to move out, rent a decent apartment, and live comfortably for a year without even needing to sell the house. But selling the house wasn't about economic necessity. It was about surgical justice. It was about excising the tumor. I got up and went to the bathroom. I washed my face with cold water. Looking in the mirror, I noticed the tired, sad woman from this morning had vanished. In her place stood Boss Morales. I pulled my gray hair back tightly, smoothing down the flyaways. I took off my house apron and put on a navy blue silk blouse and a pair of tailored slacks. I put on my fake pearls, the ones that looked convincing enough to pass for real, and applied a touch of terracotta lipstick. If I was going to negotiate my future, I had to look like the owner, not the grandmother. The doorbell rang exactly 40 minutes later. Punctuality. I liked that. I opened the door. Harvey Bennett was younger than I remembered, maybe 35, wearing an impeccable suit and a sharp, awake expression. He held a leather portfolio under his arm. When he saw me, his expression shifted from professional courtesy to a mix of surprise and respect. Maybe he expected to find the frightened little old lady he had seen last time peering over the shoulder of an aggressive son-in-law. "Mrs. Morales," he said, extending a firm hand. "It's a pleasure to see you again. And if you don't mind me saying, you look wonderful." "Come in, Harvey," I replied, shaking his hand with my nurse's grip, the kind of grip that usually catches men off guard. "We have very little time and a lot to discuss. Don't worry about taking off your shoes. It doesn't matter if the floors get dirty anymore." I led him to the dining room. With a sharp sweep of my arm, I shoved my grandkids' breakfast mess into a pile at the corner of the table, showing zero delicacy. Harvey watched the movement, raising a single eyebrow, but he didn't say a word. He was discreet. "Sit down. Do you want coffee I'm not offering because I don't have time to make it? Let's get straight to the point." Harvey opened his portfolio and pulled out a notepad and a tablet. "Direct to the point. Sounds excellent to me, Mrs. Morales. I checked the zoning maps and property values in this area before coming over. Your property is a gem. Not so much for the house itself, forgive my bluntness, it needs major updating, but for the lot. A half-acre in this neighborhood is something that just doesn't exist anymore." I nodded. I knew exactly what I had. "My kids are traveling," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "They come back in 15 days. By the time they set foot in the airport, I want this house to have a new owner, and I want to be far away. Is that possible?" Harvey drummed his fingers on the table. His salesman brain was calculating commissions and risks. 15 days is a highly aggressive timeline, Adelaide. A traditional sale with a mortgage takes months. Banks are slow. The bureaucracy is heavy. "I don't want banks," I interrupted. "I want cash, investors. You mentioned last time that you had foreign clients or developers, people with briefcases, not mortgages." He smiled. It was a shark's smile, but a shark that was swimming on my side. "I have a builder group. They've been looking for a large lot for months to build luxury condos. 4 stories boutique living, they call it. They would pay cash, immediate wire transfer, and they don't care about the condition of the house because they're going to demolish it." I finished the sentence for him. Harvey tensed up, expecting me to get sentimental, expecting the widow to cry over the bricks she laid with her late husband. He looked at me cautiously. "Probably, yes. Is that an issue for you?" I looked around the room. I looked at the walls that had absorbed Robert's screaming Lucy's demands and the spoiled tantrums of their children. I looked at the ceiling, at the water stain Robert had promised to fix 2 years ago and never touched. "Harvey, if it were up to me, I'd drive the wrecking ball myself," I said with a coldness that froze the air in the room. "Knock it down. I don't want one brick left standing on top of another." Harvey relaxed his shoulders and let out a short, nervous laugh. "Wow, that is not the reaction I usually get, but it makes things infinitely easier. If we sell this as a development lot, the price goes up and the closing speed skyrockets. I can have a formal offer on your table by tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow is too late," I shot back, crossing my arms. "Call them right now. Tell them they have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but the offer expires in 48 hours. And I want an absolute confidentiality clause until the ink is dry at the title company. Nobody puts a for sale sign in my yard. I don't want nosy neighbors calling my daughter while she's at Disney." Harvey nodded, visibly impressed. He pulled out his phone. "I'm going to make a couple of calls. Excuse me for a moment." While he paced back and forth on the porch, speaking aggressively into his phone, I stayed in the dining room. I felt a strange vibration humming through my body. For years, they had made me believe I was slow, that I didn't understand how the modern world worked. Robert used to laugh at me when I couldn't figure out the smart TV remote. Lucy rolled her eyes when I asked why they paid so much interest on their credit cards. "Poor old thing," they thought. "She's losing it." But it wasn't slowness, it was patience. The patience of someone who has stared death in the face and knows you don't have to sprint to arrive on time. They mistook my silence for ignorance and my kindness for weakness, a fatal misdiagnosis. In medicine, a misdiagnosis kills the patient. In life, it kills the inheritance. I remembered an afternoon a few months back. I overheard Robert talking on his phone in the backyard. He thought I was deaf or asleep. Yeah, sure. "As soon as the old lady kicks the bucket, we sell the whole thing. Place is worth a fortune. We pay off my gambling debts and buy something modern on the coast. Just gotta tolerate her for a couple more years." At the time, I felt pain. A sharp, stabbing pain in my chest. But now, remembering those words, I only felt crystal clarity. They had already sold the house in their minds. They had already buried me. I was just expediting the paperwork, with the minor difference that the check was going to have my name on it, not theirs. Harvey walked back inside. His cheeks were flushed with excitement. "Mrs. Morales, I have news." "I'm listening." "The investor group is highly interested. They know the location. In fact, they've been quietly buying up the smaller houses on the block behind you. They said if the title is clear and you are the sole owner, they can wire 50% as earnest money by Friday, and the rest at closing next week." "I am the sole owner," I assured him. "I have the original deeds right here. The price—" Harvey wrote a figure on his notepad and slid it across the table toward me. I looked at the number. I had to blink twice. It was obscene. It was a string of zeros that simply didn't fit into my daily reality of going to the grocery store and looking for tomatoes on sale. It was enough to buy 3 houses, just like this one in another city. It was enough to live the rest of my life like a queen. "Is this in dollars?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Cash, Mrs. Morales. Direct wire." I felt the air leave my lungs for a second, but I quickly recovered. I pictured Robert's face if he saw that number. I pictured Lucy buying mouse ears with my credit card, thinking she was exploiting me for a few $100 while she was actively losing millions. "I accept," I said. "Perfect. I need copies of your ID, the property tax records, and the deed." "Everything is ready." I pointed to the green folder I had already set on the side table. "But I have one more condition, Harvey." Harvey looked up, pen in hand. "Tell me." "The house is being sold closed door, but I want it empty of inhabitants. Meaning the furniture can stay or go, I don't care. But there are personal belongings here. A lot of clothes, toys, electronics. From my tenants. Usually the house is delivered empty, ma'am, but if it's going to be demolished, the builders don't care if there's furniture inside. The machines will just crush it all." "No," I said, a crooked smile creeping onto my lips. "I don't want the machines to crush it. I want to hire an estate sale and express clean-out service. I want everything in this house that does not belong to me liquidated or donated before closing." Harvey looked at me confused. "You want to sell your kids' things?" "I want to cleanse my life, Harvey. And when they get back, I don't want them to find a single dirty sock to remind them they ever lived here. Whatever money you make from selling Robert's furniture and electronics," I paused, savoring the moment, "donate it to the St. Vincent's nursing home. It'll do them a lot more good than it will my son-in-law. Harvey let out a loud, genuine belly laugh. Adelaide, you are dangerous. I like you. I have a contact who specializes in foreclosure cleanouts. They are fast and discreet. They roll up with box trucks, and in 6 hours, there isn't even dust left. I'll call them. Have them here on Monday. Deal. We shook hands to seal the preliminary agreement. His hand was warm. Mine was cold and rock steady. When Harvey left, taking copies of my documents and the promise of a new life with him, I was alone again. But the scenery had changed. I was no longer the abandoned victim. I was a 5-star general at her command post. I walked into the living room. The massive 80-inch television Robert had bought using Ernest's pension money that I had lent him for an investment dominated the wall. Enjoy it while you can, Robert, I muttered, because next week that TV is going to be entertaining the old folks at St. Vincent's. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of sherry, something I hadn't done in years. I sat in my favorite armchair, the only one they never used because they said it smelled like old people. I pulled out my black notebook and a red pen. On the first blank page, I wrote in large capital letters, Operation Disney, Day 1, Phase Evaluation Complete, Target Total Freedom. I looked out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky a violent shade of orange. Duke, my old loyal Labrador, scratched at the glass door. I got up to let him in. He looked at me with his milky eyes and wagged his tail. You're coming with me, Duke, I told him, scratching behind his ears. To a place where there are no kids pulling your tail and no son-in-law to kick you when I'm not looking. We're going far away. The dog seemed to understand, sighing as he laid down at my feet. I had 14 days ahead of me. 14 days to erase 5 years of abuse. 14 days to pack up 40 years of memories and cut the dead weight loose. My eyes drifted to the calendar in the kitchen where Lucy had placed a Mickey Mouse sticker on the day of their return. Stay and watch the house. I repeated her words, the irony tasting as sweet as the sherry. Don't worry, kids, I'm watching it. So well, I'm making sure it gets top market value. Night fell over the house, but for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was the one holding the switch now, and I was about to turn their lights out. Monday arrived with the military precision I loved. At exactly 8 a.m., the St. Vincent de Paul charity truck parked in front of the house, partially blocking the driveway where Robert used to park his SUV with the arrogance of a plantation owner. It wasn't a fancy moving van. It was a battered workhorse with peeling paint and an engine that coughed black smoke. But to me, it was the carriage of my liberation. I opened the door before they even rang the bell. I was wearing my old nursing administrator uniform, not the clinical white scrubs, but the navy blue two-piece I wore for board meetings. It made me feel bulletproof. Good morning, Mrs. Adelaide, greeted Ray, the clean-out foreman. He was a heavily built man with hands like shovels and an honest smile. Mr. Bennett told us we were doing a general sweep today. More like an exorcism, Ray, I replied, waving him inside. Anything with a red tag goes. Furniture, clothes, toys, electronics, everything. Ray whistled when he stepped into the living room and saw the sheer scale of the job. I'd spent all of Sunday marking my territory. Red tags shined like war wounds across my daughter and son-in-law's possessions. The Italian leather sofa Robert bought and forbade anyone from touching with shoes on, red tag. The next-gen gaming console, red tag. Lucy's collection of designer handbags piled up in the entryway, red tag. You sure about this, boss? Asked one of the younger guys, with Ray eyeing the massive television with pure greed. This thing is worth a fortune. Exactly why it's leaving with you, I said firmly. I want you to sell it at your charity bazaar and use the cash for those orthopedic beds the nursing home needs. And step on it, boys. We don't have all day. They got to work. The sound of packing tape ripping and heavy furniture scraping across the floor became the soundtrack of my morning. I stood in the center of the living room with my clipboard directing traffic like I was running triage after a multi-car pileup. Careful with the door frame, that display case is heavy. Yes, take all the liquor bottles from the bar, too. Nobody drinks on my dime anymore. As they hauled out Robert's massage recliner, the one with the built-in cup holders, I felt a twisted pang of satisfaction. I pictured Robert walking in, looking for his throne, and finding nothing but empty space. The man who mocked my wicker chairs for being old lady furniture was about to find out his modern luxury was ending up in a thrift store. Mid-morning, the landline rang. The chaos of the movers paused for a second. I knew exactly who it was. I checked the caller ID. International call. I let it ring 3 times. I took a deep breath. It wasn't fear I was feeling. It was the adrenaline of a hunter waiting in the blind. "Hello," I answered, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. "Mom, finally." Lucy's voice came through distorted, backed by the sound of carousel music and screaming children. "I've been calling your cell for 10 minutes and it's turned off." "Battery died, honey. I'm busy around the house. Is something wrong?" "Yes, what's wrong is that you're a disaster. We forgot the kid's allergy medicine, the pink syrup. I need you to go into my bathroom, find the bottle, and text me a picture of the prescription so I can see if I can find something similar at the park pharmacy." Not even a hello, not a how are you, just demands. I looked down the hallway. 2 men were currently carrying Lucy's entire bathroom vanity out the door, bottles and all, dumped into generic cardboard boxes. "I can't do that right now, Lucy." Dead silence on the other end. The background noise of Disney seemed to freeze. "What do you mean you can't, Mom? It's for your grandchildren. Are you watching your soap operas or something? I told you to stay and watch the house, not sleep all day." "I am watching the house," I said, my voice dropping an octave, growing raspy. "I'm doing a deep clean, just like Robert was always complaining we needed. I can't go in the bathroom right now because they're cleaning it." "Who's cleaning it?" Her tone shifted from annoyance to suspicion. "Don't tell me you hired Mrs. Higgins. Robert specifically said he didn't want strangers prowling around." "It's not Mrs. Higgins. It's a specialized crew." "Specialized, Mom, you sound weird." "Look, I don't care. Find the prescription as soon as they're done and send it to me. And another thing, Robert says to keep an eye out for an envelope from the bank. It's extremely urgent." "If anything arrives, I'll hold on to it," I lied. The bank envelope had arrived on Saturday. It was an overdraft notice. It was currently sitting in the trash, shredded into pieces so small, not even a forensic team could put them back together. "All right, I gotta go. The Mickey parade is starting and the kids are being impossible. Don't forget to water my orchids." She hung up. Not an I love you. Not a thank you. I stood there with the receiver in my hand, listening to the dial tone. Ray looked at me from the doorway, holding a cardboard box full of Robert's softball trophies. "We good, Mrs. Adelaide? This stuff going too." "We're perfectly good, Ray." I slammed the phone down onto the receiver. "And yes, take it all. Let them haul off their past glories. There's no room for ego in here anymore." By noon, the house was starting to look skeletal. The echo had returned, but it was different from the echo of loneliness I used to feel. It was a clean echo. Without my kids' tacky, oversized furniture and synthetic rugs, I could finally see the original hardwood floors Ernest and I had installed. They were dull and scratched from years of abuse, but they were still solid. I made a quick sandwich and ate it standing up in the kitchen. The room felt massive now that Lucy's giant espresso machine, the air fryer, and the bread maker she used exactly once were gone. All that was left was my small Italian percolator and my white ceramic plates. Then it was time for phase 2, the financial phase. I put on my light coat, grabbed my purse, and locked the front door. Ray's truck was already gone, packed to the roof. The house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. I walked the 4 blocks to the local bank branch. The midday sun warmed the asphalt. I felt incredibly light, as if I had dropped 40 pounds of dead weight. The blast of air conditioning hit my face as I walked through the glass doors. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Morales," the teller greeted me. A nice young man who knew me from my monthly trips to deposit my pension check. "Making a withdrawal today?" "I need to speak with the branch manager, and I need to cancel some cards." They walked me into a glass office. The manager, Mr. Pineda, was a sweaty man who was always trying to sell me insurance policies I didn't need. "Adelaide, what a pleasure. How can we help you today? Is there an issue with your authorized users?" I pulled out the plastic credit cards I had fished out of Robert's wallet the night before his trip, when he stupidly left it on the kitchen counter while loading the car. He probably thought he lost them in the sofa cushions and just left with his primary card. But these were the extension cards tied to my account, the ones I paid for. "I want to cancel these authorized user cards immediately, and I want to block every single recurring auto draft tied to my primary checking account that isn't a basic utility. Water, power, gas, stay. Everything else, Netflix, Spotify, Amazon, the gym memberships, cut them all. Mr. Pineda dabbed his forehead with a handkerchief. But ma'am, if we do that, those services will be suspended. Your son-in-law Robert was in here a while back and mentioned those subscriptions were vital for his work. I let out a short, dry laugh. Vital? The premium sports package and online video game purchases are vital, Mr. Pineda. I am the primary account holder. My signature is on the dotted line. Cancel them all right now. And I want you to drop the credit limit on my primary card to the absolute minimum. To the minimum. But you have an excellent credit line based on your history. We wouldn't want to. I don't want it. Cap it at $500. Just enough for my groceries and nothing else. If anyone tries to swipe that card for a penny over that amount, I want it declined. No overdraft protection. No courtesy calls. Declined. The manager typed on his keyboard, visibly uncomfortable. He knew he was losing a generous client, or rather a highly profitable victim. It's done, Adelaide. The authorized cards are dead. The recurring charges will bounce starting tomorrow morning. Thank you. That will be all. I walked out of the bank feeling the power surging through my fingertips. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't made a scene. I had simply turned off the tap. For years, they had drank from the well of my hard work, as if the water would never run dry. Now they were going to find out what thirst really felt like. I walked back home. The sunset was painting the bare walls of the living room a deep orange. I sat down in my armchair, the only piece of furniture left in the room, and waited. I knew the hit was coming soon. The time difference was playing right into my hands. It had to be dinner time over there. Time for the expensive themed character restaurants. At 7 p.m., my cell phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was text messages. A waterfall of push notifications from the bank app. Security alert. Attempted charge of $350 at Princess Royal Table. Declined. Security alert. Attempted charge of $350 at Princess Royal Table. Declined. Security alert. Attempted charge of $50 at ATM. Declined. I smiled. They were frantically swiping the card over and over, probably with the waiters staring at them impatiently, and the kids crying because they were hungry. Then the phone rang. It was Robert. I answered on the second ring with a calmness that surprised even me. "Mother-in-law," Robert screamed. There wasn't a trace of fake politeness left in his voice, just pure panic and fury. "What the hell is going on with the card? I'm standing in the Castle restaurant with the bill in my hand and the card won't swipe. It says insufficient funds. You're humiliating me." "Hello, Robert. Good evening to you too," I said, casually inspecting my fingernails. "It's not insufficient funds. It's just that the card has a limit now." "But it's always had an open limit," he roared. "Call the bank right now. Tell them it's a mistake. I have the restaurant manager standing right here." "It's not a mistake, Robert. I did it. I went to the bank today." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could hear his heavy, ragged breathing. "What did you do? What?" I lowered the limit and canceled the authorized users. I realized I was spending far too much on unnecessary things. You know, just like you said, someone has to watch the household economy. "Are you out of your mind?" His voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "We are at Disney. I don't have enough cash to cover this dinner. Lucy maxed out her card on souvenirs. You're leaving us stranded." "I thought you had Lucy's credit card." "No, that's the one we told you was maxed out." "Well, maybe it's time you dip into your own savings, Robert. Or ask them if you can wash dishes in the back." "Adelaide," he yelled, completely forgetting the ma'am and the mother-in-law act. "You fix this right now. When we get back, we are going to have a very serious conversation about your senile dementia. You are not competent to manage your own money." Once upon a time, that threat would have made me tremble. It would have made me apologize profusely and scramble to fix their mess. But today, sitting in my empty living room, his threat sounded incredibly hollow, like a dog barking behind a fence miles away. "You're right, Robert. When you get back, we are going to have a very serious conversation. But for now, I suggest you ask to split the check or go find an ATM. Oh, and don't worry about the house. It's very quiet." I hung up. And for the first time in my entire life, I powered my cell phone completely off. The silence reigned supreme once again. But I knew that 3,000 miles away, absolute chaos had been unleashed. I pictured the scene perfectly. Robert red-faced with rage, Lucy frantically digging through her designer purse, the kids whining about why their dessert hadn't arrived yet. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I opened a can of tuna for Duke and poured myself a glass of the wine I had rescued before the movers hauled away the bar cart. "Cheers, Duke," I said, raising my glass to the dog. Tonight, we eat in peace. The next day, Tuesday, Harvey Bennett arrived with the final paperwork. He stopped dead in his tracks the second he walked through the door. His eyes scanned the empty expanse of the house. The bare walls where pretentious artwork used to hang now showed nothing but nails and dust outlines. "Wow," he exhaled. "Adelaide, you really don't play games, do you?" "I told you I wanted the house empty, Harvey. It's unrecognizable. It actually looks bigger." "It is, Harvey. Dead weight takes up a lot of space." We sat down at the dining room table, the one piece of furniture I had decided to keep until the very last day. He spread out the documents. The smell of fresh paper and wet ink filled the air. "I have good news. The investors are blown away by how fast we're moving. They accepted every single condition. The earnest money check is already certified, and the closing date is officially set for Friday at noon. They are in a massive hurry to start the demolition permits." Friday. I felt a tiny wave of vertigo. 3 days away. Yes, that is very fast. I looked around. I looked out at the backyard where the grass was already growing too tall because I had fired the gardener. Why pay him to mow grass that was about to be ripped up by an excavator? "No, Friday is perfect." "Great. I need your signature here, here, and here." Harvey pointed to the dotted lines. "With this, the property legally transfers at 12 p.m. on Friday. You have until that exact minute to hand over the keys." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed Adelaide Morales with firm, clear strokes. Every signature was a link in the chain snapping in half. "One more thing, Adelaide," Harvey said, packing the papers into his briefcase. "The buyers asked if there would be any issue with them bringing heavy machinery onto the lot this weekend. They want to start knocking down the perimeter brick wall on Saturday." I smiled. It was a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes, but it warmed me straight down to my soul. "Tell them they can bring all the heavy machinery they want. My tenants return late Sunday night. It would be an absolute shame if they couldn't find the driveway." Harvey looked at me with a mixture of profound admiration and sheer terror. I think that was the exact moment he understood the sheer magnitude of my vengeance. It wasn't just about selling the house. It was about wiping their path back home off the map. "You are a master strategist, ma'am. I would never, ever want you as an enemy." "I'm just a mother who got tired, Harvey, and a grandmother who finally decided to retire from being a maid." That night, I slept like a rock. I didn't have nightmares about the hospital or about mounting debt. I dreamt of the ocean, a calm, deep blue sea where absolutely no one was asking me for anything. Halfway through the week on Wednesday, the landline rang again. I let it ring until the answering machine picked up. It was the voice of my neighbor Patty, a notoriously nosy woman who lived glued to her front window. "Adelaide, honey, what's going on over there? I saw a massive truck on Monday, and now the house looks completely dark. And Robert called my cell. Can you imagine? The man who never even waves at me called to ask if you were okay because you aren't answering your phone. He says you're having a mental breakdown. Do you need me to come over?" I listened to the message and hit delete. I didn't need Patty. I didn't need anyone. I started packing my own things. There wasn't much. All my clothes fit into 2 large suitcases. My books, my keepsakes of Ernest, my important documents. That was it. Everything else, the old bedroom set, the dining table, I was leaving it behind. It was part of a life that simply didn't exist anymore. I found an old shoebox buried at the back of my closet. Inside were photos of Lucy when she was a little girl, birthday parties, her high school graduation. I looked into her eyes in those pictures, desperately trying to find the exact moment she had mutated into this selfish stranger. I couldn't find it. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I gave her too much. Maybe in my desperate attempt to make sure she never suffered the hardships I went through, I completely surgically removed her ability to value hard work. I picked up a photo of Ernest, Lucy, and me at the beach. We looked so happy. I hesitated for a second. Should I keep it? Then I remembered her voice on the phone. "I told you to stay and watch the house." I closed the box and tossed it into the donate pile. Let someone else invent happy backstories for those photos. I was going to start writing a new story, one without ghosts. Friday morning broke gray and overcast. The air was thick with static electricity. I woke up early, showered, and put on my best travel outfit, pearl gray slacks and a crisp, perfectly ironed white blouse. Duke was pacing around restless, as if he knew the big day was finally here. I clipped on his brand new leash. At 11 a.m., a black town car pulled up to the curb. It wasn't Harvey. It was a private car service I had hired. The driver, a polite young man, got out to help me with my bags. "Just these, ma'am, just these. And the dog." We loaded the trunk. Before getting in, I walked back into the house one last time. It was empty. Completely, devastatingly empty. My footsteps echoed like gunshots down the hallway. I walked into the kitchen and placed the keys on the granite countertop. The same granite Lucy always complained about because she wanted marble. Next to the keys, I left an envelope. It wasn't a tearful apology letter. It wasn't a long, dramatic explanation. Inside the envelope were exactly two things: the receipt for the hotel room I had booked for tonight, before my flight tomorrow, paid for with my own money, naturally, and a glossy, brightly colored travel brochure I had grabbed from a travel agency. The brochure read, "Europe awaits. Premium tours for seniors." And on top of the brochure, I left a sticky note with my sharp, angular nurse's handwriting, clear and completely unshaken. "The house has been watched. So well watched that you will never have to worry about it again. Enjoy Disney. Reality is waiting for you when you get back." I walked out and pulled the front door shut. The click of the deadbolt sounded incredibly final. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked, as I settled into the plush back seat with Duke resting his head on my lap. I looked at the house through the tinted window. I saw the overgrown lawn. I saw the facade that would very soon be nothing but rubble. And for the first time in years, I didn't see a prison. I saw a cashier's check. "To the airport, young man," I said, a massive, genuine smile lighting up my face. "And please don't worry about speeding. I'm in no rush. Nobody is waiting for me." And that is the most wonderful feeling in the world. The car pulled away. As we drove down the street, I checked the rearview mirror and saw a heavy-duty pickup truck with a construction company logo pulling up to the curb of what used to be my house. A man stepped out holding a roll of blueprints and a sledgehammer. Perfect timing. Right on cue, my cell phone, which I had turned back on strictly for emergencies, buzzed inside my purse. It was a text message from Robert, mother-in-law. "We managed to borrow some cash from a friend. We are furious. When we get back on Sunday, you have a lot of explaining to do. Do not touch anything in my office." I read the message and let out a laugh so loud it startled Duke. "Oh, Robert," I whispered to the screen. "I haven't touched a single thing. But I'm afraid the office isn't going to be there when you get back." I slipped the phone back into my purse and looked straight ahead. The highway stretched out in front of me, infinite and completely full of possibilities. The execution of the plan had been flawless. Now came the grand reveal. And even though I wouldn't be there to see the looks on their faces, my imagination was a pretty sweet consolation prize. The game was over. Checkmate. Saturday morning broke with a grayish calm, the kind that promises rain, but I woke up wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets in a suite at the most exclusive hotel near the airport, 20 miles away from my old life. I was in absolutely no rush. I ordered room service, freshly cut fruit, hot coffee, and eggs Benedict, something I never would have dared cook at home because of the mess it makes. As I was spreading butter on a warm piece of toast, my cell phone, leaning against the flower vase on the table, lit up. It wasn't a phone call. It was a push notification from the smart home security app I hadn't deleted from my phone yet. "Motion detected at front door, 9:15 a.m. I smiled and took a slow sip of my coffee. They had come back early. Of course they had. Getting their credit cards cut off must have been a fatal blow to their fantasy vacation. Without plastic money to buy lightning lane passes and overpriced themed meals, the magic of Disney fades incredibly fast. I opened the app to check the live camera feed. The HD video was crystal clear. A yellow taxi was peeling away from the curb, leaving behind a mountain of luggage and 3 people standing on the sidewalk, staring at the facade of the house with their jaws practically hitting the concrete. Robert was pounding on the front door with a closed fist. Lucy was digging frantically through her designer tote bag, pulling out a set of keys that jingled uselessly in the morning air. The kids, exhausted and undoubtedly jet-lagged, were sitting on top of the Disney suitcases, whining. "Open the damn door." I could read my son-in-law's lips through the screen. He jammed his key into the deadbolt. He tried to turn it. Nothing. He tried again, violently forcing it. The key wouldn't turn because the lock cylinder had been drilled out and replaced on Friday at exactly 3 p.m. by the demolition company's locksmith. Robert stumbled backward and kicked the solid oak door. The beautiful oak wood I used to hand varnish every single spring, and pulled out his cell phone. My phone vibrated on the hotel room table. Incoming call. Robert's son-in-law. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. I wanted their desperation to aerate a little bit like a fine vintage wine. On the 6th ring, I swiped the screen to answer, tapped the speakerphone button, and went back to slicing my melon. "Good morning," I said, my voice sounding incredibly fresh and well-rested. "What the hell did you do to the lock?" Robert's scream was so loud I had to turn the volume down on my phone. "We're standing outside. My kids are starving. The key won't go in. Open this door right now, or I swear to God I'm kicking it down." "I really wouldn't recommend doing that, Robert," I replied, gently dabbing the corner of my mouth with a cloth napkin. "That door doesn't belong to me anymore, and it certainly doesn't belong to you. If you break it, they're going to press charges for destruction of private property. And considering your credit cards are currently frozen, I really don't think getting arrested is a smart financial move right now." "What the hell are you talking about, you crazy old bat?" Lucy interrupted, having clearly snatched the phone away from her husband. Her voice was shaking violently, a cocktail of pure fury and rising panic. "Mom, stop playing games. We had to jump on the first cheap flight out of Orlando because you left us without a single dime. Open the door." "I can't open the door, honey. I'm not there." "What do you mean you're not there? Where are you?" "I'm eating breakfast," I said, looking out the hotel window at the city skyline. "And honestly, you guys should probably go find somewhere to eat breakfast too, because as of Monday, that house doesn't have a kitchen, or a refrigerator, or a roof, for that matter." On the video feed, I watched Robert physically shove Lucy out of the way so he could press his face against the large living room window. He cupped his hands around his eyes to block the glare and peered inside. His reaction was worthy of an Academy Award. He staggered backward, his face draining of blood, as if he had just seen the Grim Reaper himself. "It's empty," he screamed, spinning around to face Lucy with his eyes bulging out of his skull. "Lucy, there's nothing in there. We got robbed. Call the cops. They cleaned us out." "Nobody robbed you," I interrupted, my tone hardening to steel. "Everything was either sold or donated, completely legally." "My gaming consoles, my 80-inch TV," Robert roared, snatching the phone back. "I had my life savings tied up in that stuff." "Your television is currently sitting in the rec room at the St. Vincent's nursing home," I informed him, a wave of profound satisfaction rolling down my spine. "The seniors are absolutely thrilled. They're watching the morning news in stunning high definition. And as for your savings, well, Robert, let's just say your little toys covered the interest on the 5 years of free rent you enjoyed under my roof." "I am going to sue you," he shrieked, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple as he waved his arms in the air. "That house is my wife's inheritance. You had no right." "Misdiagnosis, doctor," I said, slipping seamlessly back into my clinical charge nurse voice, the one I used to put arrogant medical residents in their place. "The house was in my name, sole owner. I have the original deeds, the signed purchase agreement, and the certified cashier's check to prove it. The house was sold on Friday. Closed-door deal." A graveyard silence fell over the line. On the video feed, I watched Lucy's legs give out. She collapsed onto one of the hard-shell Disney suitcases, her Minnie Mouse ears still sitting on her head, looking utterly ridiculous against the backdrop of her absolute tragedy. You sold the house," she whispered, sounding as if her brain literally couldn't process the words. "Dad's house." "Yes, Lucy, your father's house, the exact same house you two turned into a free flop house and an emotional dumpster. I sold it to buy my life back." "But what about us?" she asked. And for the very first time in 5 years, I heard the voice of the little girl she used to be, long before she became so impossibly cruel. "Where are we going to live?" "That is an excellent question for your husband, the man of the house," I replied, not yielding a single millimeter of ground. "He always said I was a burden, that I was in the way. Well, honey, the obstacle has removed herself from the road. You have total freedom now. No annoying grandmother to bother you, no mother-in-law watching your every move. You are completely free." Right at that moment, a heavy black pickup truck with the construction company's logo pulled up to the curb on the video feed. A tall man wearing a yellow hard hat and holding a clipboard stepped out the foreman. Right behind him, two uniformed private security guards stepped out of a trailing SUV. Harvey Bennett wasn't lying when he said the investors protected their assets. "Who the hell are these guys?" Robert asked, his voice dropping an octave, immediately intimidated by the physical presence of authority. "Those are the representatives of the new owners," I explained calmly. "I highly suggest you move your luggage off the sidewalk. You're blocking the path for the heavy machinery arriving tomorrow." "Mom, please," Lucy started to cry. It wasn't the cry of genuine repentance. It was the wail of a spoiled child who just had her favorite toy taken away. "We have nowhere to go. We don't have any money. The kids are exhausted. Just let us in, even if it's just to sleep on the floor." I felt a sharp twinge in my chest. That old maternal instinct, that treacherous muscle that had always forced me to forgive them for everything, tried to kick in. But then I looked down at my hand. I looked at my knuckles, permanently deformed from decades of grueling shifts to pay off that house, to pay for her college degree, to pay for their endless whims. I remembered Robert's mocking laugh. "You stay and watch the house." That laugh was my antidote. "I don't have the keys, Lucy. I handed them over yesterday. And even if I did have them, I wouldn't open the door. You have your health, you have your youth, and you have 2 expensive college degrees that I paid for. Figure it out." "You're a witch," Robert screamed, completely losing what was left of his mind as he saw the security guards approaching them, gesturing for them to leave the property. "I hope you rot with your money. You're never going to see your grandkids ever again." "That is a price I am entirely willing to pay for my peace of mind," I said. And for the first time, I truly meant it. "Besides, Robert, with the kind of money I have now, I can easily fly out to see them whenever I want. Assuming you two ever manage to get a home of your own to host me in." "Ma'am," a new voice echoed through the phone. It was the security guard talking to Robert. "This is private property owned by Bennett Developments. You need to clear the perimeter. We live here." Robert tried to defend himself, but his voice cracked, sounding high-pitched and incredibly weak. "Not anymore, you don't," the guard said firmly. "You aren't on the property registry. Please move along or we will have to call a patrol car." I watched on the screen as Robert tried to puff out his chest, only to immediately deflate. Lucy was sobbing, with her face buried in her hands. The kids, terrified by the yelling, were clinging to their mother's legs. It was a pathetic image. But it was completely necessary. It was the radical surgery required to cut out the cancer of their dependency. "Mom," Lucy pleaded into the phone one last time, her voice cracking. "What are we supposed to do?" "Exactly what adults do, Lucy," I replied with a cold calmness that amazed me. "Grow up. Go find a cheap motel. Take out a personal loan. Sell the jewelry I bought you. Learn what life actually costs. I am no longer your bank and I am no longer your maid. I am your mother. And the absolute best lesson I can give you right now is to let you fall flat on your face so you finally learn how to stand back up." "I hate you," she whispered. "I know. You'll get over it once you need money again and you realize that hatred doesn't pay the rent." I hung up. I stared at the cell phone screen for a few more seconds. I watched as Robert, utterly defeated, picked up the impossibly heavy suitcases, the exact same ones he had refused to help me with, and began trudging down the street to look for a cab, followed closely by Lucy and the crying kids. They walked hunched over, as if they were carrying the weight of the entire world on their shoulders. For the first time in 5 years, my driveway was completely clear. I closed the security app and deleted it from my phone. The final digital cord was officially cut. I stood up from the table, walked over to the full-length mirror in the suite, and looked at myself. I didn't see a cruel old woman. I saw a woman who had just saved herself from drowning. I smoothed my hair, took a deep breath, and felt my lungs fill with pure, clean air, completely free of the stale stench of resignation. I grabbed my purse. I had a flight to catch in 3 hours. I wasn't going to Europe like the fake brochure I left behind suggested. That was just to throw them off the scent. My actual destination was a small coastal town down south, where a retired nurse friend of mine owned a little bed and breakfast. I was going to look at the ocean. I was going to eat fresh fish And most importantly, I was going to sleep through the night without the fear of someone screaming at me because I didn't wash a plate fast enough. As I left the room, I left a massive cash tip on the pillow for the housekeeper. You always have to value the hard work of others. It was a lesson my kids had never learned, but one that life with its heavy hand was about to teach them by force. While I was riding the glass elevator down, watching the city sprawl out beneath my feet, my cell phone buzzed with a text message. It was from the bank. Deposit received, wire transfer, Bennett Developments. Current balance, X dollars, XXXXXX. .00 *. I stared at the number. It was obscene, and it was incredibly beautiful. I watched the house, Robert. I whispered to myself, smiling at my reflection in the brushed metal of the elevator doors. I watched it right down to the very last penny. The real transformation was just beginning. They were going to have to build a life from absolute scratch. I just had to enjoy the life I had left. And oh, I fully intended to enjoy it. The elevator doors slid open into the bright, sunlit lobby. The world was massive. And finally, it was all mine. The salty breeze of the Pacific has a funny way of healing old wounds. It doesn't erase them, but it cleans them out, letting them scar over with sun and salt. It's been 6 months since I locked that heavy oak door for the last time. And sometimes when I'm sitting out on the terrace of the Blue Inn, I still think I hear the ghost echoes of Robert's screaming or the manipulative crying of my grandkids. But then the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks washes those ghosts away and brings me right back to the present. A present that for the first time in decades belongs entirely to me. Life moves at a different pace here on the coast. My friend Martha, the same nurse I pulled endless double shifts with 40 years ago, didn't take me in as a refugee. She brought me on as a partner. Her little boutique hotel desperately needed a firm hand with the bookkeeping and someone who knew how to smile warmly at guests without letting them walk all over her. It turns out that the useless old woman who wasn't fit to watch an empty house was perfectly capable of managing a high-end tourist business at the peak of the busy season. I wake up at 6 in the morning now, not because someone is demanding their breakfast, but because I want to watch the sun turn the ocean water pink. Duke, my old Labrador, seems to have aged backward 5 years. He doesn't hide under the furniture shaking anymore. Now he chases seagulls down the beach and sleeps belly up in the shade of the palm trees, completely unafraid that some spoiled brat is going to pull his tail or snatch his food away. If he could heal, so could I. The transformation wasn't magic. It took work. The first few days I was drowning in terrible guilt. That sticky Catholic guilt they drill into mothers, the lie that we have to suffer endlessly for our children, that we have to be martyrs right up to the grave. I used to wake up in a cold sweat, agonizing over whether Lucy had enough money to keep the lights on, or if Robert had managed to find a job. But then I would remember the black notebook, the insults, the stay and watch the house, and that guilt would harden into a certainty as cold and solid as granite. I didn't abandon them. I emancipated them. News of their reality reaches me in slow drips, filtered through emails I only read when I'm in the mood, and through the discreet updates Harvey Bennett sends me every month, along with my investment portfolio statements. From what I hear, the fall from the Disney clouds was absolutely brutal. Robert tried to sue me, naturally. Harvey told me, holding back laughter, that not a single decent lawyer would take the case once they pulled the records and saw the house was 100% mine and the sale was bulletproof. They blew what little cash they had left on useless legal consultations. The last I heard, Robert, the great lord of the manor, who used to mock taxi drivers, is now driving for a rideshare app just to make rent on a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood. The irony is exquisite. Now he's the one carrying other people's luggage. Lucy had to sell off her designer handbags. It hurt me to hear that, not because of the bags, but because of the sheer humiliation my proud, vain daughter must have felt. But that pain was mixed with a sliver of hope. Harvey mentioned he saw her working as a receptionist at a local dental clinic. It's honest work. It is the very first time in Lucy's entire life that she is putting bread on the table with the sweat of her own brow, and not by swiping my credit card. Adelaide, Martha says, snapping me out of my thoughts as she sets an iced coffee on the terrace table. You have a call on line 2. It's the nursing home. I set my book down and walk into the lobby. The phone feels light in my hand. Hello? Adelaide? It's the director at St. Vincent's. The woman's voice is vibrating with excitement. using that genuine tone you only hear from people who work for a true calling. I didn't want to bother you, but I just had to tell you. We're officially cutting the ribbon on the new physical therapy room today. I smile. A large chunk of the money from liquidating Robert's luxury furniture, plus a hefty cash donation I made from the sale of the house, paid for it. I am so happy to hear that, Director. Did the new equipment work out? Did it work out, Adelaide? It's a miracle. And I have to tell you something that's going to make you laugh. Do you remember that gigantic television, the one that looked like a movie theater screen? How could I forget it, I say, remembering all the afternoons Robert spent glued to it, completely ignoring the world around him. Well, we mounted it in the main common room. The residents are absolutely mesmerized watching nature documentaries. Mr. Gregory, the one who barely ever speaks, told me yesterday that he had never seen a lion look so big. That screen has brought the whole world to people who can't go out and see it anymore. A lump forms in my throat, but it's a sweet one. I'm so glad that machine is finally doing some good in the world, I reply. Enjoy it. You are an absolute angel, Adelaide. No, Director. I'm just a woman who finally decided to put her resources where they actually belong. I hang up the phone and look around the sunlit lobby of the inn. There are fresh flowers in the vases, the exact same orchids that Lucy used to let die from neglect. Out here, with the humidity of the ocean, they grow wild and beautiful. Sometimes I think about the old house. I found out they fully demolished it 2 months ago. Harvey texted me asking if I wanted to see a picture of the leveled lot. I told him no. I don't need to look at rubble. That house served its purpose. It was Ernest's and my home. Then it became my prison. And finally, it became my ticket to freedom. Let them build their modern condos. Let new people move in with new stories. I don't live inside old bricks anymore. The greatest lesson I've learned these past 6 months has nothing to do with money, even though having millions in the bank certainly helps me sleep like a baby. It has to do with respect. Here in town, nobody looks at me like the grandma. I am Mrs. Morales. The local fishermen tip their hats to me when I go down to the docks to buy the morning catch. The tourists actually listen to my recommendations. Martha completely trusts my medical judgment whenever a guest feels under the weather. I have reclaimed my name. The sun starts to dip, painting the sky in violent streaks of violet and orange colors that never looked this intense back in the smog of the city. I walk down the path to my small cabin at the back of the property. It's a modest space, just a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchenette. But it is mine. There are no toys to trip over. There are no dirty dishes stacked in the sink. There is only silence, and there is peace. I sit down in the rocking chair on my porch. Duke drops heavily at my feet, letting out a long, content sigh. I pull out my tablet. Yes, I learned how to use it perfectly now that nobody is hovering over my shoulder calling me slow. I open my email. There's a new message. The subject line reads, "Sorry." It's from Lucy. My finger hovers over the screen. For months, her emails were nothing but venom, demands, hatred. How could you do this? You're a thief. You're going to die alone. But this one is different. It's short. I tap to open it. Mom, I cashed my 3rd paycheck today. I paid the registration fees for the kids at the public school. It's really hard. Robert comes home exhausted, and we don't fight as much anymore because we just don't have the energy. The kids ask about you. I told them you were traveling. I don't know when I'll be able to forgive you for the house. But today I tried to cook rice, and I remembered how you used to make it. I burned it. I just wanted to tell you that. I burned the rice, and I cried. I read the message twice. There is no "I love you." But there is humanity. There is a brutal recognition of reality. That burned rice is her very first lesson in humility. They are finally learning that food doesn't magically appear on the table, that money costs hours of your actual life, and that the mother they had wasn't a household appliance. She was the load-bearing pillar holding up their entire fantasy world. I don't reply. Not yet. Replying right now would mean stepping back in. It would mean trying to fix her pain. They need to taste the burned rice. They need to learn how to scrape the bottom of the pot and start over. That capacity to survive is the only truly valuable inheritance I have left to give them. I turn off the tablet screen and look out at the horizon. I've been thinking a lot about Ernest lately. At first, I felt like I had betrayed his memory by selling off our legacy. But now, feeling the ocean breeze on my face, I know he'd be raising a glass to me. He hated watching Robert take advantage of me. He always used to tell me, "Adelaide, you are the oak tree of this family." Well, old man, the oak tree got tired of providing shade for people who only wanted to chop it down for firewood. The oak tree pulled up its roots and transplanted itself into soil where it actually gets watered. I have plans for tomorrow. I'm taking the truck into the next town over with Martha to look at some artisan looms. I want to buy new curtains for the guest rooms. I'm going to spend my money on my time using my own taste. And on Sunday, maybe, just maybe, I'll FaceTime my grandkids. Not to promise them presents or trips to Disney, but just so they can see that their grandmother is happy. So they can see that life doesn't end at 60 or 70. So they learn that dignity does not have an expiration date. I pour myself a glass of dry, ice-cold white wine. I raise the glass toward the moon, which is just starting to rise over the silver ocean. To the house, I whisper. And the word doesn't feel heavy anymore. And to those who stayed behind to watch it in their own way. I take a sip. The wine tastes like glory. It tastes like absolute victory. My kids went to Disney looking for cheap plastic magic, and in their supreme arrogance, they accidentally gave me the only real magic there is, the magic of finding myself again. They thought they were leaving me behind, trapped in the past, babysitting their misery. They had no idea that by leaving me alone, they were handing me the keys to my own cell. Now I'm the one who travels. Not on airplanes or cruise ships, but in the massive, endless tranquility of knowing that finally, nobody owes me a damn thing. And I don't owe anyone anything either. Duke lifts his head and lets out a soft bark at a passing firefly. Take it easy, boy, I tell him, rubbing his ears. We're home. This time, we're really home. The night wraps around me warm and welcoming. Tomorrow is a brand new day, and it will be mine. All mine.